Hello, I'm here in Vienna, Austria at the Kunstraum am Schauplatz, and I'm now entering the exhibition, my solo exhibition, which is a kind of retrospective and B, a show of new works. And this room is all about what I have seen as a kid in regards of art, and I grew up with drawings and prints by Alfred Kubin, and this is one of his prints that belongs to my brother. This print, we can see how Alfred Kubin made satirical drawings of the people of Bernstein, Austria, and that is actually the village where my grandfather grew up and part of my family lived. So he used to make drawings and prints about the absurd and funny little people living in Bernstein. And because Alfred Kubin had some financial problems once in a while as an artist back in the 30s, 40s, that was definitely usual. So he went once in a while to my family, who owned back then in German they called it Kreisler, form of supermarket before there were supermarkets, corner shop basically. And then he would bring us a print and get 2 weeks of food and stuff like that. So there, originally we had a lot of prints, but then you have a lot of children and a lot of aunts and a lot of uncles, and suddenly you end up with only 5 prints. And there are 4 prints in this exhibition, because the 5th one I couldn't get because of COVID. Because the 5th print is in ownership of my uncle, and because I didn't want to risk him getting an infection of COVID, we decided to leave that print out of this exhibition. So along comes a new series that is kind of related to what I've played as a kid. I was playing in my fantasy world, and I played Dungeons and Dragons and Warhammer and all of that, and that was a way for me to escape from, well, let's say it wasn't always easy to be the one kid that did not have the correct Austrian sounding last name, and who had, let's say, eyes that weren't completely round and blue-eyed like sometimes people wanted me to have. So what if I wanted to escape from racism and also homophobia, I went not to metal or novels, I went to, or poetry, as some other people go, and it's amazing. I went instead to fantasy and science fiction role-playing games and board games. So I decided to engage in a new painterly practice, and here I started to paint objects on geometric forms and they are tiny, but oh boy, trans person, or whatever you want to call it, they take a long time. One of these small things takes me 2 days to complete. And yes, so yeah, they're hexboard, meaning you can play with that. I actually wrote a full set of rules, and up to 5 people can play with that. And this is a game board for 3 people, and every person would start out on the outmost corner of the gaming field. So this would be a starting point, this would be a starting point, and this could be a possible starting point. And you would need to complete these things. Like say now this is completed and it's a full hexagon, so you can move to the next space. And there's a set of rules when you can move to the next place, what do you have to do, what happens if you move to the next thing. This is all for next and other discussion of this work, because that's a rule-based discussion. It takes at least 10 to 20 minutes to explain that whole thing, and that's the second object that I've placed on the floor. So I have now decided to not show you the videos, because this is a video, and I think talking about videos with sound in a video is kinda counterproductive. So this is another work of mine. It was actually a commission or a test for a commission for an illustration of a fantasy book. And that's when the first time I really started to make colors into my abstract shapes. And it's in this room because it is a departure from my previous work that was always only in one color. So let's move to the next work that actually has the same color than my hat. You see, nearly the same color, maybe I think 2 or 3 grades off. And you can see I like ornaments. I'm not like Mr. Loos. I think ornaments are good, they are fine. And Austria, with its hatred of maximalism and horror vacui, should really learn to accept that more is more and less is less. I know this is me making a joke, and I don't think that hanging paintings back to back is really making for a good show. So this is one of my earliest paintings. This one is from '99, when I was still in school, a young wee person. So, and because when this show opened, we already had something like a soft lockdown. I mean, it's a big show, but I'm still only able to have 4 people at the same time in the exhibition. So to get, at least during the opening, some media presence on Instagram and stuff like that, I decided to hang this object here in a way that you could position yourself under it and make a selfie. Yes, it's okay if it moves, if it shakes. I mean, after all, it's my object, I have to touch it. But then it's, Franz West would have called it, it's called a Passstück. So therefore, I think it's completely acceptable for me to touch it. And yes, I don't want everybody to touch it, but if some kids decide to touch it because they really want to get a feeling of the object, then I'm completely A-okay with that. And then it can float and all of that. So yes. Yeah, and I like that semi quasi fantastical, magical moment where an object can float inside of an exhibition space, but then it also just hangs there. I mean, I'm only doing this for the video right now, because for me it makes very little sense to constantly move it. You would need a set of assistants to constantly move the work, but it's fun. So these are small objects. But at first, I think it was 2015, something like, yes, 2015, and I started to work in a refugee organization that my back then fiancée, the woman I wanted to get married to, had started, and I worked there as PR, marketing, and general assistant of the directorship. And back then I only made videos. I had stopped making paintings, I have stopped making objects. All that was lying in the past. I studied documentary film, and I was quite happy doing political videos and all the like. So when the refugees asked me, what do you do? I showed them some videos, and let's say they were not really into that. I think they wanted to see something uplifting and not something about racism in Austria or the Second World War or genocide and all these topics that haunt me and that follow me. So I had made some small, really tiny, round objects with faces, smiling faces on it. And just for me, just for fun, I don't know actually why I started. I think I had some sculpting material at home and I just wanted to play around with it. And I burnt them and got the finished object to my workspace, to the refugees, and at some point I just saw one of them being very upset. I think he was afraid of his mother, or he just wanted to see his mother. There was something about the mother. I can't really recall what it was, because there was a lot of emotionally very downlifting stuff happening there. So I somehow have decided, without conscious decision, to not think about it that much, and then I forgot. But there was a lot of, I mean, we had a lot of survivors there, and we had a lot of people who lost family, or at least were afraid that their family could die. And me, is coming from a refugee family, that opened a lot of wounds. So I gave one of them one of these smiley faces, these round smiling faces, and I thought really like, okay, good, this is such a stupid thing. Why are you actually doing it? But that's the only thing I had in my pocket, the only thing. You can't give a person a coin to think that you're happy. It was a sign of humanity for me. I'm going to give you something that maybe somehow, by an absolute chance, could lift you up. And yes, the guy was really appreciative of it. He got very emotionally in a positive way. He said, "I'm really thank you. I will keep that. I will keep that. I will." I think we had discussion, is this a talisman, is this something religion, and so on. It's just like something that you could look at and try to have a smile once in a while. And then other refugees came to me and asked for the same thing, and I started to hand those things out, and I realized I want to have a material practice again. I want to have something that is haptical, that I can touch, that I can work on with my hands. And so that's why I started to go back to my childhood, when I was making remote controls out of wood that I found in the woods. And then I started to paint on them, and all of them are made from trash. I mean, I first had an IKEA chair that broke down while I was sitting on it, and by being a cheap artist back then, still in university, I decided to keep the chair and cut it into pieces and build objects out of it. So here you can see the side of the object and the front. And you can see this, they're all different layers and of wood that I collected by inadvertently, without me wanting to destroying my IKEA chairs, but just trying to sit on them. And so this is my series of wish-fulfilling machines. And the wish-fulfilling for machines were also the departure into something fantastical, into a place where I no longer wanted to talk about politics in the now. I want to talk about them in a form of not abstract way, but I want to tell stories that are seemingly or possibly universal, where I don't have to make one video for one group and another video for another group, where I can where I have something that is, where I'm able to show this to people of different backgrounds, and they can relate to them, each as not as a survivor, but just as somebody who relates to the issues. And here, yes, describing your own artwork is never easy, I have to tell you. So this is the starting point for the whole thing that I call the in-world. In-world is the fantasy world I have been writing off and on again about 2.5 years. And I had a very traumatic experience 2.5 years ago, and that's when I really had said I have to do something with that. I have to engage with it, but on an, so say, abstraction layer, on a universalist layer. And then I decided to actually take the history that I have been part of with my family, with being a family of survivors of the Nazi horrors, and of being refugees from the Soviets, and all these experiences are built into my family story and in the stories that my family tells each other. So I decided to take that history and make it apparent or possible to perceive through other people. And so the wish-fulfilling machines are machines in this fantasy world, which is very much fantastical. So there are no humans there, it's all different kinds of alien-looking life forms, but none of them are, let's say, good or nice or easy. They are all complicated and have their own conflicted gray political area, so to speak. So the wish fulfilling machines in that world are machines that can fulfill certain wishes that are seemingly impossible, or that go against the line of what is possible by physics and all of that. But the way they are made, they are created in that world is through exploitation of other people, of marginalized people. So these magical things have their own history in that world. So there is an upcoming exhibition about only them, and I'm going to make a publication only about those and the history of that and the criticisms inside of the in-world of these objects. So this is the first pivotal point for what is my new foundational grounding as an artist. It's the fantasy world, the places that don't exist and that are still have reminiscences of a past that is somewhat relatable or built on the very histories of this world, of our reality. So this is the main room. This is the room where I have placed have a thematic exhibition, so to speak. So in the in-world there are many different worlds. To say it with a philosophical world, there's non-interrelated spheres, and then something happens in that world. Those spheres find the people in those spheres find a way to connect those spheres together via something that is the hexagonal plane, the game that I've just shown you again before. So let me just find the finger. So this is where you would start. You would come into the hexagonal plane here, and then you move around there. You collect and finish this, so you can move there, and then you can leave to another sphere. So this is basically that hexagonal travel system, place between worlds. You could use it's like the heavens in some religions, or it's like limbus in others, but it's a in-between world between worlds. But nobody knows what these worlds actually are. It's very open what it could be. But what we know is that suddenly different places have been interconnected irreplaceably. The singular experiences of them are no longer possible. They're now in a collective experience. The fantasy world, the science fantasy world, has met its first globalist event. Suddenly, new avenues, new places are possible. And what happens when people find new places? They make maps. So these are the first maps from that exploration of the hexagonal world. This is the second map, and they are wrong maps, and they are maps that try to instill meaning and show places, but none of that is existent. It's all conjectural. The person who drew this map didn't even visit the place, just wanted to sell a map. They were snake oil salesmen of a gold rush that nobody actually knew existed. And then along came the second people, so to speak, and really entering the space, and then they made a second kind of map. But because nearly everybody back then still believed that the first maps had some figment of reality, they related their maps and their map drawing on those original conjectural maps. So they built a lot of fantasy in it, like seemingly monstrous things, objects and architectures that don't exist in the space possibly, but maybe they exist. And every map has their own mistakes about the world and other things that are real. So here we have a monster. We have a monster looking in the world, similar to maps from 1200, 800, from Middle East, where they drew fantastical, amazingly creative things, but none of that is actual reality. And still, even if we go to today, our current map projections are still just projections. They are, in a way, a twisting of facts, so they can be put on a flat plane. So another map, and you see again a monsterish kind of an animal, and then you can lose yourself in the imagery and in the objects. There is no apparent middle in that object. Everything is somehow related to each other, and there's a stream coming from one movement to another, and that is blocked by another form. So, but still, these maps are still not correct. So you could not use them safely to go your way in the hexagonal plane. If you go back to the thing, so maybe let's go to the original object. So let's say you would look at this thing and you would say, okay, there's the there's the monster. But there's actually no monster there, it's just a hole and you fall down. Or the thing tells you, move from there to there, and there's actually something. There's actually a hexagon, you can step on that safely, but there's nothing there, because the person has misremembered, but still had to sell a map. So for a long time, all of these maps were wrong or included falsehood, and suddenly a set of people started to make correct maps that were mostly correct, that had something like 90 to 70 to 80% truth hidden inside of them. And that kept on going on for a while, where all of this map mapping was done. And then along came the bureaucracy. And that's the symbol, it's their stamp. And they took all these maps, all these mostly correct maps, and they said all these maps are now outlawed. All the objects used to traverse the hexagonal plane are now illegal. We won't allow them. You can't enter this plane on your own now. It is forbidden. And then they said, yes, traveling the hexagonal plane is still allowed, but it's not allowed just for anyone. You have to sign a ledger, and you have to sign a bureaucratic thing, and they build relays. They build travel relays. And so you can move into the travel relay and come out at a different travel relay, like this one. So by doing that, they eliminated the very possibility for using the hexagonal plane from moving from one place to another. And deep down, the bureaucracy won, but the technology is still there. People could still travel from one place to another with the hexagon. But yes, that's what happened there. Globalization happened, and then the liberalization of people being able to move from one place to another was eliminated, and now they have the worst case of both things. They have bureaucratic power forbidding the people the usage of the hexagonal plane, and they have what is normally brought on by globalization. So they have a fantastical world of monsters and everything, and that is now in the process of undergoing globalization of sorts that can remind us of the early times when the Roman Empire just came about, or when the Ottoman Empire was built, or when the colonial empires in Europe started to take what they wanted without thinking about the ethics of others. So this is also, the wish-fulfilling machines that we have seen earlier are also a product of that very globalization, where marginalized people without the power to fight back are used for their labor force to build something that is then sold for an extreme profit. And they are then left with all the problems that non-regrowable resource will bring if it's taken from you, like we see it in the karst that was created in the north of Venice, when people tore down tore down all the trees near to Duino, and now there's only a mountain without trees, and all the earth has been washed away. But we have a place, a wondrous, fantastical place like Venice, which its own class wars, which its own problems. But yes, so this is, every one of these stories has a point of origin of political struggle in this world, but it's still uniquely a world on its own. So that it pertains or hopes to be a fantastical world that can talk about these issues from a universalist or possibly universalist stance. So this is the first curatorial, so to speak, discussion of this exhibition. Thanks for listening for so long, and I wish you a very healthy and secure lockdown and last days of this global crisis. Goodbye and good luck.